I'd like to welcome. Uh, and we are going to start the session. Maharaj is already there. So,
Okay. Making a few arrangements here. So let's begin by offering our respects to Srila Prabhupada. And who's our secretary? Let's Nama Om Vishnu Praya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tenamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Pasatyade Satarane. So my dear secretary of this, please, as soon as someone admit the devotees who are appearing.
yes, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
I am coordinating for today's. My name is Shyam Gopal Das.
Sham Rupadas. Hare Krishna Sham Rupadas.
Hare
When you
Krishna.
see that someone wants to become admitted, please admit them, especially if they're authorized. It appears on, I guess you know how to do that.
Please excuse me. Maharaj, please.
Well, devotees are joining and you have to admit them. So a little thing appears in blue, it says admit.
Yeah, we are being admitted. Almost all have joined.
Good. All right, so today this is supposed to be a summary of what we learned so far, but since what we learned so far was a summary, part of it was a summary, so I'll give a summary. Now let me say a few things about the purpose-driven yatra in relationship to your action learning projects, because this is what you're doing is applying some of the, or at least trying to apply some of the principles that we're explaining. Now, let me talk about the obstacles first. One obstacle is that this idea of purpose-driven yatra is not so easy to understand because it's very difficult for us to see a clear role model within ISKCON, which will demonstrate what we're explaining about. In other words, in our society, especially since Srila Prabhupada has left, we have many different leaders. And actually every leader has his own personal viewpoint on how to expand Krishna consciousness. And certainly they take the purposes of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna and they apply them in their area of leadership. But then purpose-driven means something different. It means to apply the purposes of Krishna, but in a balanced way, not only locally, but also internationally, and also in our personal lives, for instance. Now, everyone is applying the purposes of things like hearing and chanting about Krishna, worship, getting devotee association, becoming a disciple and engaging in spiritual habits that will help us grow spiritually, engaging in service, devotional service, to expand the Krishna consciousness movement, both internally and externally, and developing a life mission to dedicate oneself 100% in the service of Krishna, 24 hours a day. Know clearly what our purpose of life is and how to engage in that purpose to become a pure devotee. So these things are known. It's not something new, but it requires a strategy and a process by which we can balance these 5 purposes so that our spiritual growth personally is healthy, the health of our community grows in a healthy way, and our mission internationally grows healthy. And when it's health, then there's growth. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted us to expand the Krishna consciousness movement because everyone is Krishna's eternal servant, and Krishna is very anxious to get all his children back to the spiritual kingdom as soon as possible. So that's the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that should also be our mission if we're part of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Now, because we're living in a society where this idea, not of the programs I'm talking about, but of the idea of balancing these 5 programs of worship, fellowship, discipleship, ministry, and mission, because there's no clear program to balance them in our society. Therefore, this is what this is introducing. Now, in relation to what you're doing, obviously none of us, including myself, are going to change either the mood or the strategy or the processes that are going on locally in our temples or in our communities or even internationally. Therefore, we advise you not to try to change your local community, because most of us are not managers or preachers. To introduce purpose-driven yatra in a temple or in a yatra or internationally requires cooperation between the preachers and the managers. But because we're not expecting any of us to actually be able to, first of all, understand this process so thoroughly would be one thing. And the second thing would be to have the capacity to actually convince our local management of having this part of their system of managing. Therefore, we advise you to start moving some people, some devotees, especially from crowd to congregation. In other words, form your own small group with the approval of the local management, if there is one. Form a small group of devotees and then have them follow the process, which will include explaining what we're doing to them, what our purposes are, what the advantage of joining this group would be, what they can expect from it, and what they can expect in return from it, and what their obligations would be, and how this will help them fulfill their needs, such as having saintly association, having saintly direction, leadership, having a purpose in life, which would give one permanent, eternal results. There are things that one can get from the Hare Krishna movement or any religious movement that one cannot get from any other movement. You cannot get eternal benefit from anything else other than devotional service. So to explain to people, probably those who have been cultivated already, or we might consider part of the crowd or potentially part of the congregation, because in our society presently we have no clear way of discriminating between who's a member of the crowd and who's a member of the congregation. Sometimes we have namahatas and other such bhakti vrikshas and other such small groups, and that's clearly a methodology of cultivating people in small groups, which is certainly quite good. But sometimes we don't have that in temples. We don't have namahatas. We don't have bhakti vrikshas, bhakti vriksha programs. We do have something called congregations, and sometimes the devotees get together and they meet regularly and they do some kirtan. But generally speaking, the program is not purpose-driven. That is, it doesn't necessarily include cultivation of the 5 aspects. There's certainly worship in all our programs. People come and chant Hare Krishna, they take prasadam, and they generally strive for discipleship to follow the principles and chant japa and come to the standards where one can take initiation. And sometimes there's some service orientation in the group also. There's not usually so much of and there's also some development of spiritual habits towards discipleship. And then sometimes there's something trying to define that our mission is to spread Krishna consciousness, and therefore devotees engage in some missionary work. But often these things are not standardized or clearly thought of as being necessary for these small groups in order to achieve spiritual growth. That a balance of devotee care, devotee association, service, preaching, etc., mission is really necessary for even the emphasis may be different at the beginning, because at the beginning people have to be, the emphasis has to be more on hearing and chanting and explaining. Because first of all, people have to they have to believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then they have to be introduced in belonging to Krishna's family. Then they have to come to the platform of becoming pure devotees. But one thing in our society which is necessary, that this purpose-driven yatra, part of which membership, for instance, will help further our mission, is that it'll give a platform by which we can identify ourselves as part of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, as an international family, which we can make clear commitments and make spiritual advancement in the development of transcendental knowledge. That becoming part of Krishna's family requires commitment to the family. It requires actual practical commitment in terms of sadhana. It requires different types of commitment to service, towards spiritual development, towards developing a mission in life, towards perfecting our skills in devotee association, other skills. These things are necessary for spiritual growth. So if we have international membership based upon the principles of spiritual growth, then we'll all feel ourselves more of part of a spiritual family. But in any case, this is something that could perhaps come in the future. But for right now, as I said, the main objective would be to form for yourselves within the communities that you're preaching in, small groups who agree to become a member of your small group for a certain amount of time. And in that small groups that you'll be helping them cultivate, so that Krishna consciousness, when they have regular meetings in small groups, and when they also, in the small groups, they come together into the larger devotee community, not that we only keep them in small groups isolated, but they also come to and participate in the activities of the greater devotee community. But we don't have so much influence over the greater devotee community, generally speaking, but we can have some influence over the small group that we formed. And in the small group that, as I said, there should be some type of membership, that they know that joining the small group is not apart from ISKCON, and it's not ISKCON either, unless you happen to be the manager, or you're, for some reason, that the manager's interested in such a project. But in any case, in your project, if you form a small group, and you tell them that this group will be engaged in a certain type of programs to help them spiritually develop, to give them the advantage of joining this small group, even if it's only committing themselves for 6 months or a year, whatever your APL is. And then explain to them what the method would be. Namely, you'd be getting together. And what would be the advantage? Here in the small group, devotees will be able to hear and chant together. Hear and chant together means parashparam, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Machita machkata prana bodhyantash parashparam katayantas nityam tu shanti charamanti cha. We want to give devotees an opportunity to not only hear, but also to express their realizations and their understanding and to ask appropriate questions. Not only in the context of a class or in a darshan with a senior devotee, but also in a more relaxed atmosphere where they can actually freely express their understanding and they can ask other devotees that they have confidence in or faith in about their own experiences to help them in their spiritual understanding and in their practical application of spiritual life. So small groups are very good for that. Gives everyone an opportunity to express themselves and to ask and to get guidance from other devotees, other aspiring devotees. And to have some kind of mentorship for those who require it or desire it, so that they can feel they have some support within their group. So that's the advantage of small groups: inspiration, direction, opportunities for service, and in larger groups for inspiration. But at least if you have a APL and you form a small group, then you can see how purpose-driven yatra can at least apply to that small group as much as you can understand what purpose-driven yatra means and see what the effect is. It's an experiment, we could say. Now let me go about some summary about purpose-driven yatra so that you can see something about what I'm referring to. So first of all, let me just share my screen here. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I wonder if, yeah, here we go. Okay. So first of all, let me start out, because this is a summary, and this summary is taken from the book Purpose-Driven Church by Rick Warren, mostly from there, and seen from a devotee perspective. So myths about developing a devotee community, because we're becoming sannyasis, maharajas. Sometimes they used to say that Maharaj means Maha, King of the Maha. So we're not becoming Maharajas in order to get the most Maha. We're becoming Maharajas in order to help develop the devotee community and to expand it. So some of the myths about temple growth. So one myth is that the only thing that large temples care about is attendance. And indeed, sometimes in our society, as Raghunath Prabhu was explaining yesterday, that sometimes we measure everything according to how many people come to our program. That we consider the program successful, whether it's a Sunday feast or an outreach program, by how many people actually attend. But we can't, this is called the crowd. We cannot judge an army by how many people are eating there at the mess hall. Mess hall means the place where the army eats. We can't judge the number of devotees who are actually participating in the temple by going to the Sunday feast. We can judge the army by how many soldiers are out on the battlefield fighting. That's the army, what it's meant for. Or how many are assisting in the fighting also, not just how many are eating. Now, temple growth is a natural result of temple health. As I explained in my introduction when I gave it, that in the body there are different systems: digestive system, endocrine system, circulatory system, and health means when all these systems are in balance with each other. If the digestive system becomes too prominent at the expense of the circulatory system, then we get disease. Or any system that becomes overly emphasized or decreases too much, becomes sub or too strong or not strong enough, becomes a source of imbalance, and therefore there is disease. So when everything is balanced in the body, then the body naturally grows, especially when one is a child. If the body is balanced, then we expect growth. When there's health, there'll be growth. So similarly, in Krishna's body also, there are different activities, or we could say systems, such as worship, devotee association, including devotee care, spiritual discipline, development of spiritual habits for growth, service, devotional service, according to one's inspiration, according to one's experience, according to one's ability. One can render service, practical service, steady service. And then mission, having a burning desire to spread Krishna consciousness to others and dedicating one's life to it, that's what sannyasa means. So, how temple health can only occur when everything we do is based on scripture. We always refer to scripture. We don't make things up. Our purposes are based on scripture. And our mission is balance. That we take Krishna says so many things in Bhagavad Gita, but we have to see how to apply them in a balanced way, an effective way for health, for development. So each of Lord Krishna's purposes must be in equilibrium with the others for health to occur. That doesn't mean that we don't emphasize one purpose at times. It means that we don't emphasize one purpose at the expense of all the other ones, that we forget about them completely. At different times, for instance, we have to emphasize one purpose over another. For instance, at the beginning, when people are unfamiliar with Krishna consciousness, to them at least, we have to emphasize more the hearing and chanting. And when they develop, then we can put into emphasis more devotee association. And in that devotee association, they can emphasize more eventually spiritual growth and habits. And that spiritual growth and habits can develop into emphasizing service, devotional service, practical service. And then when that devotional service develops, then they get a higher and higher taste, higher and higher commitment to devotional service, higher and higher understanding of devotional service, and then their life's mission can manifest itself with a burning desire to develop the Hare Krishna movement and to distribute it to others. So, one thing is that a balance in the temple community does not occur naturally. It's not that by Krishna's mercy everything will just manifest itself. It has to be done intelligently, organization and intelligence, systematically. And for that, we have to continually correct imbalance. Generally speaking, in our communities, this is a little bit challenging because generally a leader who's been there for any length of time, naturally the community gravitates around his inspiration and his talents, whether it be for devotee care or for programs or for building projects, whatever. It becomes more or less the purpose of that particular yatra, even educational programs, whatever. It becomes the focus of that yatra. And therefore there's generally very little attempt to correct any imbalance because it's not seen as an imbalance. Generally speaking, when we focus in on anything, when the leader is really focused and has abilities, then in that particular field, the temple and the yatra develops very nicely. Because focus is a very important part of growth. The problem is that even if the leader focuses on one or two aspects of purpose, Krishna's purposes, and develops very nicely in comparison to other yatras, the problem is when that particular leader leaves, either due to fall down or to old age, or just getting burned out by having to do everything, then the result is that unless he trains someone else with an equal amount of the same aspirations he has, and everyone else has the same faith in the next person who takes over the yatra, then generally speaking, the yatra doesn't develop as nicely as it did during the presence of the leader. So we must understand that, and at least if you have a small group that you're working with, try to create a balance, and if it's possible, try to correct the imbalance. At least within your group, have the opportunity to see if that's what that means and what the benefit of that is. How people's spiritual lives develop much more holistically when there's actually balance in their lives. So it's natural for us to overemphasize the aspect of devotional service we feel most passionate about. So we also, every one of us, feels passionate about something in devotional service, and we tend to emphasize it. But this is an opportunity to just try to either get help from outside or to see within the groups that we have, people have other aspirations, try other inspirations, and try to inspire them to manifest their gifts, their inspiration, their experience to help the other members of the group so that we have a more of a balanced small group where the whole group is not just dedicated for book distribution, it should be dedicated for book distribution, but not only, or for devotee care, or only, it should be devoted to devotee care, but not just solely to devotee care. It should be devoted to service, but not solely to service. It should have a balance. An Ayurvedic meal, a balanced Ayurvedic meal has all the 5 tastes: sweet, sour, salty, pungent, stringent, and bitter. And that's considered a healthy meal. When in proper proportion, all these 5 tastes are there. Bitter generally is less, in most cases, than something like sweet. But it's there. The element is there, and it's in proper balance with the other tastes. Bitter, saltous, sweet, sour, astringent, and salty. Excuse me. Then the meal that we're eating will actually be healthy. And with a balance. Then with a balanced diet, we'll have a balanced digestive system, which will lead to a balanced endocrine system, skeletal system, nervous system, circulatory system. Everything begins for health in the body with diet. Diet is a major factor, of course, psychology. Mentality is also principal, but from the gross level, we can control diet most easily. And that will lead to a healthy diet, a healthy digestive system, generally leads to all the other systems. So therefore we have to intentionally set up a strategy and structure to force ourselves to give equal attention to each purpose, is what being a purpose-driven yatra is all about. Not really revolutionary, but just should be kind of common sense. But as we've heard, common sense in Kali Yuga is not very common. So the 5 dimensions of spiritual temple growth. 1, temples grow warmer through devotee association, loving exchanges. 2, temples grow deeper through discipleship, spiritual disciplines. Temples grow stronger through worship, hearing and chanting. Temples grow broader through ministry, engaging devotees in service. And temples grow larger through preaching, outreach. So these are the 5 aspects of temple growth. And just quickly, some of the other myths about temple growth, which I'm not going to go into. You must choose between quality and quantity in our yatra. 3, you must compromise your message and mission in order to grow. 3, if you're dedicated enough, your temple will grow. Next one is that there is one secret key to temple growth. And the last one is all Krishna expects of us is to be faithful. So let me just review the primary issues of temple health and growth. Number 1, who is our master? Are we directed by Scripture and by the representatives of Scripture? What is our message? What are we trying to convey to ourselves and to others? And what is our motive? What are we trying to achieve? Secondary issues of temple health and growth. Who is our market? Who is, as we heard about, who is our target audience? Who would be most receptive to our message? What are our models? What are we following? If we don't have a model, then we'll just do anything. We'll just kind of like reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Or we'll choose the most successful model according to what we consider to be success. If we can consider the number of devotees attending a program as success, then we'll follow that model. If we consider how many devotees in the temple got initiated or in a yatra, we'll follow that model. If we think that the model is distribute as many books as possible, we'll follow that model. So, what is our model? And what are our methods? What are we trying to achieve, and how are we trying to achieve it? What is our business, and how is business? So what can drive our temple community? Temple communities are usually driven by tradition. And how do we know if a temple is driven by tradition? The general statement is, when we're asked to do something, we measure it by whether we did it before. If anything new is introduced, the answer is, well, we've always done it that way. Or the answer is, we've never done it that way. That's the criteria by which programs are done or not done, whether they did it in the past or not. Driven by personality. Whoever is the prominent personality in the yatra, whether it be the initiating guru or the other temple authorities or a charismatic leader, driven by personalities. All these things are important, but the problem is personalities are not sufficient. Because when the personality, as I said, if he leaves his body or if he has a moral fall down, then the yatra has great difficulty. Pradhan Mahaprabhu.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Maharaj. Was this a class meant to be recorded? Because I don't think recording is on.
Thank you. So our secretary is recording on?
Recording in progress.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, maybe I can start over, but I don't think I will. Anyhow, hopefully you're all taking notes or something. It could be driven by finances. The bottom line to decide whether to do a program or not is the bottom line. How much will it cost? Krishna happens to be a rich man. He owns everything. But that sometimes is not taken into account that we have enough faith that Krishna will supply what we need, carry what we lack, maintain what we have and carry what we lack if we serve his mission. Driven by programs. There's so many programs, but we don't have a measurement what they're accomplishing. Mary had a little lamb, it would have become a sheep, but joined the local temple and died from lack of sleep. Sometimes we think that the only business of the temple is to keep the saints engaged. Driven by events, similarly to programs. We go from one event to the next. Whether it's a kirtan, devotees go to a kirtan mela, they become ecstatic, they get nice association, and then they go back to their homes, and they go dormant until the next kirtan mela or next event. Driven by seekers, certainly we want to accommodate seekers and make programs that will attract them, but we don't change our philosophy according to what the seekers desire. Programs may change, but our purposes always remain the same. So, should be driven by Krishna's purposes. Two essential elements for this paradigm. First, requires a new perspective. We must begin to see everything in the yatra through the lenses of the Bhagavad Gita's purposes and how Lord Krishna wants us to balance all five purposes. Now, in some yatras, if we express that, another perspective, will be considered to be heretics. So therefore, it's not advisable to become born again Hare Krishnas and go and spread the word in the yatra that purpose-driven yatra is the truth, the way, and the light, and no one goes to Krishna except through purpose-driven yatra. That's not what we're trying to do, but we should at least individually have a perspective on what it means, so we can apply it to the best of our ability in our particular lives and in our particular devotional service, where it's not going to cause disruption unnecessarily, but may help us make decisions so that our preaching becomes more effective. There are two aspects of increasing our preaching. One is being more efficient, better organized, but at the same time more effective. Prabhupada said organization and intelligence, organization for the management, intelligence for the preachers. So we want more efficient organization, but we also want more effective ways of doing that, more effective preaching. We may organize very nicely, but if we don't know where we're going, it's not going to help us very much. So both organization and intelligence are required. Like knowledge or religion and philosophy. Religion without philosophy is fanaticism, but philosophy without religion is just dry speculation. So we want to be nicely organized, but for developing love of God in a systematic way. So nothing precedes purpose. The starting point for every yatra should be the question, why do we exist? Do we exist only to make new members and whatever happens to them is up to them? To get as many devotees initiated as possible? To build as many temples as possible or expand our yatra? Why do we exist? This has to be the first question. Until you know why your yatra exists, or what your yatra exists for, you have no foundation, no motivation, no direction for service. You have to know, first we define our roles before we can make our goals. We have to know what we're doing, how we're going to do it, what we're doing it for, before we start doing it. So the first task is to define our purpose. Second task is to communicate our purposes. Many yatras that I know or temples, they spend a lot of time trying to define their purposes. After 6 months, they take the purposes and put them into the drawer, and they go dormant. They become part of the historical record. It is never really applied. So it has to be communicated. If we can't communicate our purposes, it means they're probably not very clear. And as we've gone over, we've heard there are many ways of communicating our purposes through slogans, through symbols, through seminars, etc. There are many ways of communicating our purposes. Once we're convinced that this is our purpose, then we can communicate them. And then we can communicate, but the idea is to help organize around the purposes. Organize our in your particular cases, probably it's your small group. You have to define your purposes for the small group and then communicate it to the small group. And then organize your small group around those purposes. And then fourth, apply it to all aspects of your group. Now, we don't invent the purposes. Purposes, as I said, are Krishna's purposes. And we know what they are. We want people to come together and hear and chant about Krishna. We want them to develop loving exchanges with each other. We want them to develop spiritual habits, become disciples. We want them to engage in service to the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we want them to develop this experience of becoming a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and expanding his mission in some way. So we know what our purposes are, but we may have to define them for our group, communicate them, organize around them, and apply them to every aspect of what we're doing. So what's the advantage of having a clear purpose? It builds morale, it reduces frustration, allows concentration, attracts cooperation, and assists in evaluation. So, purpose statement. It's scriptural. We want to make a purpose statement, which will define our purposes, and it should be the following. It's scriptural, it's specific, it's transferable, it's measurable, and another one is doable. So let me just again show you the purpose statement that we made in our yatra here in Slovenia. Can everyone see that? This is the purpose statement that you can't see it. Well, I guess we're just sharing the screen. Okay. Share a screen. Okay. Share. You can see it now?
Yes.
So this is based on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu's Shraddha Prema and Bhagavad Gita 18:65 to 69. So our purpose statement is to bring people to Krishna by teaching them how to practice devotional service, inspiring them to join the society of devotees and deepen their Krishna consciousness by using their energies and abilities in life to glorify the Lord and become pure devotees. Anyhow, this is just what we came up with. But first of all, it's scriptural, it's sequential, it's doable, it's measurable. We can measure how many people have come and joined the society, how many have increased their sadhana, how many are engaged in missions, in service, and how many are burning to spread Krishna consciousness to others, have a burning desire to do that. So 10 ways to be purpose-driven. 1, assimilate new members on purpose. In your small group, for instance, you should make sure that the members are joining, they know what they're doing. They know what they're expected to do when they join. They know what they can expect to get back from joining. Those who are not interested in, for instance, coming regularly to the meetings, they may not be very good candidates to become part of your small group. So one has to set the membership criteria at the beginning, and at the same time give a membership class so that people understand what they're expected to do, what they can expect in return. For instance, in a membership class, there should be an explanation of what they're expected to do, what they expect to get in return, what they expect to learn, and other things, so that before they join your group, of course it may be a little too late now, but in the future, before they join your group, they should have certain qualifications. They should be interested in at least finding out what your group is, and then give them a membership class. And then after the membership class, if they agree to perform the experiment, because there should be timeline to the group, then after they agree to follow the timeline, be participating regularly for a certain amount of time, and they know clearly what the group is for, how it will be engaged in hearing and chanting, learning spiritual disciplines, doing service, doing some outreach. Then they sign an agreement. It doesn't have to be signed in blood. It's just to be an agreement that they agree to follow these membership, this program that you have for 6 months or a year, whatever it is, and that they agree to they understand what they're doing and they just agree to follow. If they don't follow, then they won't be members anymore, that's all. But at least if they sign a commitment, then it's clear they know what they're committing to. If you don't have a membership class, you don't have clear membership defined, and you don't have a membership class, and they don't sign that they actually agree to it, then there's no commitment. And if there's no commitment, it's very unusual that they'll actually put themselves, dedicate fully to what they agree to. So program around your purposes. So these small groups should meet, and their program should be around the purposes. Educate your members on purpose. Start small groups on purpose. Add staff or assistants on purpose. Structure the meetings on purpose. Preach on purpose. Budget on purpose. Calendar on purpose. and evaluating purpose. So some of these things are more applicable for a larger group, but it's just some ideas. Community means preaching, recruiting, inviting, because we're bringing people from the outside in. We're bringing people from not knowing Krishna to believing in Krishna, to belonging to Krishna's society, devotee family, community, to becoming pure devotees of Krishna. So we're bringing them from the community to the pure devotees, to the core. Well, core in our example may not be completely pure devotees, but certainly more advanced devotees. So community means preaching, recruiting, inviting. The crowd means programs, hearing an introduction to Krishna consciousness. And then when they make a commitment to become members, belonging, small groups and large groups, the 5 programs of devotee association, 5 loving exchanges, 6 loving exchanges it should be actually. Sadhana, service, ministry, spiritual gifts, ministry according to their spiritual gifts, their heart, their abilities, their personality, their experience, outreach and discipline, discipleship, cultivating spiritual habits. And then they go to committed discipleship, which is discipleship. So these are just in terms of the committed, which I think in your small groups you can explain, but we can't expect devotees to fully experience what we're talking about. So some myths about spiritual maturity, which ultimately the group in the long term, small group should strive, and the large group should strive for, but especially spiritual maturity is achieved a lot due to the association of small groups. Of course, large groups have a part to play also. When devotees get together in large groups, certainly they get inspired by seeing how many people are committed to Krishna consciousness and participating at least. But one myth is if one performs sadhana, spiritual growth is automatic. You just chant your rounds every day and come to the program as much as possible and you'll become a pure devotee. It doesn't work like that. One has to chant offenselessly, and there are many details in the 10 offenses that have to be fulfilled to grow spiritually. Spiritual growth is mystical, and maturity is obtained only by a select few. That only the sannyasis can become pure devotees and go back to Godhead. The householders, they're fallen and usually can't do very much. Because somehow or another the sannyasis got some mystical blessings from someone, and therefore they became renounced inconceivably. Third myth is spiritual maturity can occur instantly if you find the right key. If a good fairy comes and blesses you, or if you go to the right seminar, you go to the right japa retreat, then you get the key to how to chant offenselessly and go back to the spiritual world. It doesn't work like that. Spiritual maturity is measured by what you know. That there are 5 levels of learning: knowledge, perspective, conviction, skills, and character, which I think I've gone over. Knowledge is just theoretical knowledge. Perspective is to see things from Krishna's point of view, ultimately. To see things from so many different angles, as for instance in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains how we're not this body in so many different ways. And if we assimilate that knowledge, then we may have a better perspective on how Krishna sees things. And then conviction. Conviction is something that knowledge is something we may believe in. Conviction is something we'll die for. So it's by conviction that we can remain steady in our practices of devotional service. By mere knowledge or even by perspective, we may become easily deviated, but by conviction we remain undisturbed in spite of whatever Maya presents to us. And when we're convinced about Krishna consciousness and we remain steady, then we can develop our actual devotional qualities and skills, both in time management, financial management, and most important in devotee, in relational management, with Krishna, with the devotees, with the innocent people, and with the non-devotees. Become expert devotees. And then if we develop our skills and become purified, then eventually Krishna will take control. We'll be completely under the spiritual energy, and we'll develop the character of a pure devotee, because we'll be completely in Krishna's hands as his divine instrument. Another myth is spiritual growth is a personal and private matter. Actually, it has to be done in the association of devotees, generally speaking. Very rarely, there's a Bhajanandi has the spiritual maturity to be able to advance spiritually. Therefore, spiritual growth is really depends upon devotee association. And the last thing is that all you need is spiritual study to grow. There are many devotees, they have a lot of spiritual knowledge, but they don't manifest the character of a pure devotee. As a matter of fact, they become proud of their knowledge and think themselves to be superior to others. So defining our strategy. Spiritual growth begins with commitment. It's a gradual process. It involves developing habits. It's measured by 5 factors, 5 levels of learning. It's stimulated by relationships. It requires participation in all the 5 purposes of Krishna's purposes. Hearing and chanting, manmana, devotee association, bhava madbhakto, madhyaji, discipleship, mam namaskaru, service, sharanam, preaching, madbhakta abhidashyati. Bhagavad Gita 1865 to 1868 or 69. And then we can, last is the core, which we don't have to go over so much. But these things will be developed later in explanation. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? Bhavanava, yes, Mahendra Bru.
Raj, finish your sentence. You started saying something.
No, it's all right. Did you have is that your question, is what I said, or?
No, it's about the small groups. Could you define a little bit more? How do you envision them? How many members, and what is the role of the mentor or the leader to organize them and to facilitate also their own exchanges between themselves?
Thank you for the question. That will depend upon our audience. We have different, we could say, from the crowd or even the congregation, the present congregation, probably better the congregation. We have to see what kind of relationship we have with the devotees that we can invite them to participate in our preaching project. It may be 5 devotees, it may be 6. Not too many, because we want to give devotees the opportunity in that small group so they can actually when they have time to hear and chant about Krishna, to read. And we want to give everyone a chance to tell their understanding of what was read and to give their feedback to others. We want it to be personal. Too big a group is not very personal, and too small a group is also not very productive. So a balance. We also want to have devotees who have sufficient understanding of Krishna consciousness that they may be motivated to themselves develop spiritual habits and have sufficient maturity to help others develop spiritual habits and to engage in service. So it should be a group which would be most likely to be successful because of the spiritual maturity of the participants. They may not be leaders in the temple, but they have enough spiritual maturity that they can understand the value of devotee association, the value of spiritual discipline, the value of developing ministry and service, the value of outreach. They can understand at least the value and are interested in developing these things. And that you can explain to them that the small group is specifically made to help them develop those different purposes of Krishna and therefore advance spiritually. Then when you have the small group, in the beginning at least, you have to oversee it to make sure that there's a program, a clear program, where these 5 purposes can be served in the proper proportion. So in the beginning, depending upon the spiritual maturity of the people participating, they may have to emphasize more on just hearing and chanting and expressing Krishna consciousness to each other in a systematic way. And for those who are a little bit more mature, the audience, if they're not initiated, then how to develop spiritual habits. The hearing and chanting can be focused more upon developing spiritual habits so they can come to the platform of taking initiation. And for those who are already initiated in the group, or if that's the group is composed of them, then the hearing and chanting and the spiritual habits can be focused more upon developing a service attitude. And for those who already have a service attitude and are actually participating, then of course such devotees, if they're participating in your small group, can focus more upon missionary work and outreach work, or instructing others how to improve the workings of our particular, if that's applicable, of our particular yatra that we're in. So again, not too big, not too small, but you have to see according to your circumstances how many will actually participate and what their level of spiritual advancement is, how easy it's going to be to direct them in a certain way, and how much one will have to take work as the overseer of that particular group. Because we'd like the group, we'd like those who are doing the action learning project to step aside a little bit eventually, and not act as the shiksha guru of the group, but to allow others to emerge and act as natural leaders, develop their leadership skills and their ability to express themselves in Krishna consciousness too. So we don't want it that we're coming in as the guru, telling everyone what to do. We may have to do that a little bit at first, but with the idea of developing the natural tendency that everyone has for leadership and for discipleship. We don't want them just to become leaders, we want them to always remain disciples, but we want the disciples to simultaneously become servant leaders also. Is that clear, Mahendra?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sundar Gopal approved.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisance. Maharaj, you mentioned one very important point regarding the mood that, like, we have in ISKCON, we have some kind of purpose-driven yatra, like some activities are going on, like Namhatta, you mentioned, and Bhakti Vriksha. And but like you mentioned also that like there are some issues also, problems also. Like we are not, like mood is not as an international family. And that's quite we can see that like we have groups, but then groups are there and then there is groupism also. So like here, like in purpose-driven yatra, we have groups. But I wanted to know, Maharaj, like how, like this system avoids groupism. What are the principles? Because groups will be there, then there is tendency to go towards groupism, and then this mode of international family goes away. So how this like ensures that like the small groups they don't turn into groupism? That was the question, Maharaj.
That depends upon the expertise of the leader of the small groups, how you direct them. If you explain to them from the beginning that this is your project and that this project is to create, not just a small group here, but to give them an opportunity to develop spiritually as a model in the future for others. And that this is based upon two things, Krishna's purposes and putting them in balance. That it's not meant to create a separate society apart from their present yatra that they're serving in, but just as an opportunity for them to, in a smaller group, develop these 5 purposes in balance with each other, so that they can, not to become separate, but they can utilize it better in their spiritual lives, and perhaps in the future may become a model for others to follow. That we're not creating a separate society. We're just trying to see if this applying Krishna's purposes in a systematic way in a small group will actually help our society, build a better society. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
We can't avoid this mentality of groupism because it's more or less been embodied within our society. It's been inculcated within our society. It's already there. Unless we develop an international membership program based upon Krishna's desires, based upon a systematic method of fulfilling Krishna's purposes, then the result is, due to the lack of that, either individually or collectively, we just have, naturally, something's going to fill in that gap, and therefore there'll be local people will join local groups or get initiated and join local spiritual families or even more international, broader spiritual families. But unless we put into practice, unless we establish a broader membership program, then naturally we'll have little membership programs. People have to belong to something. So unless we define what belonging to ISKCON means in a clear, systematic way, then actually we'll have smaller membership programs. But what we're doing is simply a pilot program, that's all.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Prahladananda, Prabhu. You're muted.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for giving this summary study of this proposed event Jatra by explaining the concept in point-wise form, quite clear, and mood is very, enhancing, nurturing the spiritual mood of the candidates. So I have some question regarding Maharaj. As you mentioned, the sannyas candidates are not meant to be acting like a guru. They should rather be in the mood of servant leadership. Where they go, they nurture the small team of the devotees. How gradually, potentially, they are, acquiring these 5 qualities of starting this Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta. So while doing that, can a sannyas candidate may choose a group anywhere in any part of the world, any corner of the world, wherever he feels devotees are more receptive, and they may come in small group, because nowadays through internet we have got a lot of opportunities to connect with the devotees. And if we have a local devotee who we can give guidance, and through him also we can help form this small team and gradually see how they are committing themselves to this process of hearing and chanting, taking the advantage of devotee association through these loving six loving exchanges, then gradually guiding them to become more serious practitioner of Krishna conscious philosophy and taking the responsibility up to the point of taking initiation. And then after that, maybe those who are qualified, they can also become leaders to form their small team also. So can it be done like that in any geographical location? A sannyas candidate can find a small team of people and they can guide them and help them to grow.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that unless it's not the most ideal situation, because there's in other parts of it, namely ministry work, service, together with other devotees, and also developing a missionary spirit, doing preaching together. So our society is not just meant to bring devotees to the level of initiation, develop spiritual habits, but also to further their service attitude towards the community, devotee community, and also towards outreach. And also to develop a missionary spirit, to bring Krishna consciousness to others in an effective way. So that's better done in a personal association. Zoom has become prominent mainly because of the absence of the opportunity to meet personally. But it's not ideal. If it's the only thing possible, then it's all right. But it's not. It's very hard to do service together when you're separated by thousands of miles. And it's very hard to develop a clear missionary program when you're not personally, working together cooperatively on it, individually, which is not as effective. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Maharaj. Clear.
Miki Bro?
Хари Кришна, дорогой Прахладананда Махарадж, спасибо вам огромное за милость.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, thank you very much for your mercy.
У меня вопрос о
I have a
каком
question.
качестве харизма, насколько она должна быть зрелой, трезвой, то есть как обезопасить, потому что это качество может, мне кажется, сыграть плохую, скажем, как шутку в развитии лидера. Насколько это качество?
I think that charisma of a leader, the quality of being charismatic, can play a bad part, a bad role in our service. So, how to minimize the influence of this charisma of a leader? This is my question.
No, we don't want to minimize charisma. We want to develop charisma. But charisma should be developed in such a way as it helps balance all the purposes of Krishna. Charismatic leader can be one who can actually effectively help others apply these five purposes in a balanced way. He can get devotees to hear and chant together, perform loving exchanges with each other, to develop spiritual disciplines together, to engage in service together, to develop a burning desire to distribute Krishna consciousness to others. Srila Prabhupada was the perfect charismatic leader, and he most effectively introduced these five purposes of Krishna and spread them all around the world. So we want charisma, but not charisma to become the center of everyone's attention, charisma that will most effectively help others put Krishna as the center of attention, and Krishna's instructions, purposes as the center of attention.
Krishna.
All right, Valmiki Pro?
Да, спасибо. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Rukmini Krishna Guru?
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Please accept my most obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
I have two questions, Maharaj. Number one is like in our ALP, we will be working on one particular group, and like from crowd to congregation or congregation to committed or committed to core. So how these five purposes can be balanced, because someone is working from congregation to committed, so his main emphasis will be on hearing and chanting and or inculcating discipleship. If one is working on committed to core, his main purpose will be to bring a burning desire for preaching. So how these five can be balanced for individual group? This is my first question.
Thank you. Well, as it says in the Madhura Kandambini, explaining about the sprouting of the two leaves of sadhana bhakti, Klesha Agni and Surlabha,
Subhada.
developing the good qualities. So these leaves unfold, and it says that when the Bhakti Lata beach is watered, for instance, one goes from Sadhu Sangha to Bhajana Kriya, Anishta to Bhajana Kriya, it actually enhances the first two leaves of Klesha Agni and Subhada. They're enhanced, they're not diminished by watering the Sadhu Sangha and then Anishta to Bhajana Kriya and then Nishta. The actual devotee association, Sadhu Sangha, is actually enhanced. The Anishta, the Bhajana Kriya is enhanced as one goes to Nishta. And even as one develops the different parts of the Bhakti Lata beach, all the other parts are also nourished simultaneously. So it is not that at any point of our development that any of these five principles should be neglected. In other words, we develop in the association of devotees, and the association of devotees is always to help inspire our service attitude, our devotional skills, spiritual disciplines, and our desire to spread Krishna consciousness to others. At every point, our hearing and chanting, and all the other aspects of what we're describing, they enhance each other and develop them. They don't diminish them. Even though we may emphasize one of them at a time, but that one will enhance all the other ones too. Or should enhance the other ones too.
Thank you, Maharaj. My second question is, Maharaj, like when we come to know that our ALP is complete, because this is a continuous process. If my ALP is to bring the people from committed to core and have a burning desire in them to preach, it's a continuous process. So when will come to know that, okay, now my purposes have been achieved?
Well, I think in the beginning, because this is a new project, a new idea, we advise everyone to start bringing people from the core, from the crowd into the congregation, and have the congregation set up in small groups in such a way is that it becomes purpose-driven. So it's very unlikely that in our society we have, in areas of our society, we have devotees who are in the congregation who understand the purpose-driven methodology and therefore are coming to the committed platform on that basis. So as much as we'd have an opportunity to see the development of devotees. We're trying to bring them, either they're already in the congregation, they're willing to take part in our project, or they're in the crowd and they have some desire to take part in the project, and see how that develops. We're not really on the stage where we have a huge amount of devotees who understand this process and are eligible to go on this basis from the congregation to the committed, or from the committed to the core. Does that make sense for being a Christian group?
Maharaj, I'm not very clear. I couldn't get it very nicely because, I mean, if I'm focusing on one group, so I will focus on developing their 5 aspects. So it's a continuous process. I mean, one group I can develop.
In the future, well, one group or two groups, in the future, perhaps, once we understand what purpose-driven yatra is, and once we get familiar with our group, and they actually develop, so that within that group, all the 5 purposes are being fulfilled and being developed, then yeah, then further on, then we have more to learn and apply.
Okay. Thank you.
It's an eternal process. It's not just, it's not just a project, and we leave all the devotees and like, someone's in the ocean and you throw a life raft to them, and then you tell them in a certain amount of time we're taking the life raft away and you'll have to swim or sink. No, it's a developmental process. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Maharaj. We spoke about the importance of a membership class, and we have seen in most action learning projects that is missing. It would be helpful, I think, at least for me, if we would see an example of such a class, or at least getting more guidelines how to organize it. Also to know what are the suggested requirements for membership for each level. So that is the point I wanted to make.
I think it's very important, but since it hasn't been done, once devotees are participating in your project, then it would be rather a rasabhasa to start going backwards and tell them what they should have been doing in the beginning, what they should have understood in the beginning. For in the future, when we do action learning projects, that should be clear from the very beginning what membership means in that particular group. I mean, people are a part of a group, they must have some sense of membership, and that should be defined. If you join the Boy Scouts, they tell you what membership means. If you join a bowling league, they tell you what membership means. There's commitment that you have to make. It's not that you can just come to, if you join for instance, a football team, a soccer team, then they expect you to show up at the meetings. They expect you to practice. They expect you to play in the games. It's not that you just come whenever you want and you do whatever you want. It's clear at the beginning if you're going to join that particular team, what your duties and obligations are and what you can expect in return. But we haven't done that so far, but that will be for our next year, for our next action learning projects. It'll be established first, and then it can be developed afterwards.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Nanda Kumar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for your summary presentation. My question is, can you kindly help me to get a kind of broader vision? This question come up in my mind. I'm visited all the ILS meeting and never heard this purpose-driven yatra program. And yesterday you mentioned that Vaisheshika Prabhu is kind of example of success of this program. And I believe in this year, last ILS, I visited, I believe, all his lectures. I never heard from him about purpose-driven yatra. Maybe I missed something. I don't know. But what is the right understanding? How this all what we heard in the all ILS meeting all this year and purpose-driven yatra vision? It's kind of new revelation from Krishna, or how we are kind of corresponding with each other, with ILS program and purpose-driven yatra.
I think I understand your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as the RLS goes, I guess you didn't attend my seminar.
Yeah, I visited at least one lecture.
Did you attend my seminar on purpose-driven yatra?
Yeah, at least one lecture I visited this year.
As far as Vaishya Sikaprabhu, he went down to Saddleback Church, and a couple of times, and he's applying some of the principles. I'm not saying he's declaring himself a purpose-driven temple or anything, but he expressed appreciation for what he learned, and he's applying it to what he understands to be practical in this particular situation. More clearly purpose-driven is True Das in Utah, his project there, because he's applied the idea of target audience and purpose-driven statement. He's even gone so far as to have membership classes, membership agreements, etc., etc. He has that. That was on his website, how he's applying it. Yeah, it's new. But then, as I said, tradition, driven by tradition, anything that's new, we just reject because we never did it that way. We always did it some other way. But that's probably not a very good standard when maybe in India they've progressed in their development, and even in Russia and other places. But in many places in the world, they're not developing as nicely as they could. And besides that, the test of our development will be that after the leader leaves, whether or not that projects are sustained or not, and continue to develop. I said if you can't increase, at least maintain. But we've seen when yatras are not purpose-driven, at least, whether that's the reason or not, but often when the leader leaves, either by a fall down, for instance, in Europe was the center of a great development of Krishna consciousness in terms of buildings and finances and book distribution, making devotees. But then when there was spiritual problems with the leadership, or they left their bodies, or they got frustrated and got burnt out, then many of the yatras collapsed. Their development ceased to go forward, and many times it went backwards. So we can't simply say that everything's all right, there's no need to examine any other perspective on things. Because with a little examination, we can see we should be concerned about the future of our movement. Looking at the past of it, that there needs to be there's room for improvement. And that's what we're introducing. Not a change of what we're doing of programs, because the programs, or the change of purposes is how to apply Krishna's purposes in a way which would lead to a more structure and hopefully a more continual development of our yatras beyond the presence or the absence of any particular leader. It develops leadership within everyone to the extent that they're willing to carry on the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and actively participate in it. It develops leadership within individuals, not just relying upon individuals, but actually relying upon individuals, good leadership, to develop leadership within everyone else to the extent that they're willing to participate. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you so much. It is very helpful for me. At least I feel that this is we are lacking in this kind of vision, and this is a very valuable instrument for the leaders. This purpose-driven yatras, all this what is including. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Харе Кришна, дорогой Махарадж, примите мои поклоны, пожалуйста. Спасибо большое за полезную презентацию.
Dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you very much for very useful presentation.
У меня вопрос.
I have a question.
У нас формирование малых групп в России, Бхакти-врикша, Намахаты проходило разные этапы.
In Russia, the process of forming went through different stages.
Были периоды взлета, хорошего развития, были периоды, можно сказать, упадка.
It was the times of good, stable growth. Also, it was the times of decreasing and difficult times.
И непосредственно у нас на уровне региона Золотое кольцо и соседних регионов преданные пытаются возродить или формировать новые группы малого общения.
In our particular region, so-called Golden region, devotees, they are trying to revive this system of small groups.
И преданные встретились с такой проблемой.
And the devotees faced
преданные, которые пережили определенный период или время упадка, потеряли веру в эффективность малых групп.
Abhinava, it's very difficult breaking up, so we don't hear the whole question.
Okay.
So, in our Golden Ring region, there are some devotees who went through all the problems regarding this development of small groups. They had some small groups, but they went through a very difficult period of them, and eventually they lost their faith in this small group system.
То есть у них есть определенное восприятие того, что уже было, и их сложно поднять или вдохновить на то, чтобы вновь взяться за формирование, например, Бхакти-врикш и групп малого общения.
And now for them it's very difficult to create some new groups, to create some new groups of satsanga.
So what to do? Что делать? Какой вопрос?
He's not hearing.
Я понимаю, это ситуация, но что это вопрос?
И у меня вопрос такой, я хотел бы, чтобы Махарадж дал какие-то практические рекомендации, что делать или как быть с такими людьми, которые имели не самый такой положительный опыт формирования Бхакти-врикш, групп малого общения, как вдохнуть в них новую веру, новое вдохновение, заниматься этим.
And my question to Maharaj is, I want to ask, can you give some practical examples how to inspire the devotees to continue their service and to create some new groups and to serve in these projects with a new, fresh, inspiration? How to inspire them?
То есть такая ситуация не в одном регионе, такая проблема существует не в одном регионе у нас, в России.
This problem exists not only in one region, but in many regions in Russia we have such a problem.
Я знаю. Well, my suggestion is, they're just like there are different stages of activity and enthusiasm, which go together. Sometimes people are very interested in doing something, but they're not. There's another graph called enthusiasm to do it. Now, at the beginning, people are what's called, in one seminar I took, they don't know anything. They're completely new. They don't know what to expect. And therefore, they can be easily directed to do something. Others have gotten some positive experience, and they need some coaching or counseling to come to a higher stage of enthusiasm and activity. But others are they call shipwreck survivors. They've gone through the process of devotional service. They develop some enthusiasm and some ability, but they become disappointed. And therefore they don't come to a higher stage where they can take responsibility themselves. They're stuck in a stage where they're living in the past due to their traumatic experiences. So they're not very, for this particular project, they're probably not very good candidates. I have no solution how to deal with them, because to deal with them is probably the most difficult thing you could possibly do. Because if they live in the past, it's very difficult unless we have a great spiritual potency to bring them into the present. So for these particular projects, we should look for devotees who have some positive experience in Krishna consciousness or are newbies. They're willing to learn. But to try to deal with people who are adverse to what we're doing requires a great deal of spiritual potency and a great deal of time to actually bring them to the platform of enthusiasm again. It should be done. It could be done, but these projects are not really meant for that. They're not designed for that. It takes too much. For us, it will take too much energy, and probably most of it will be wasted. So we're trying to get people to join a group, and the best way of making sure that the right people are members of the group is before they join. So it requires a certain amount of discrimination. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't preach in Varanasi first because he didn't find them receptive. He went to Vrindavan, and then when he came back, he may arrange it to find, to create receptivity. But we have to judge whether or not we're going to be effective or not, and not try to do the impossible or water down our program in such a way it makes it extremely difficult to do it. Thank you. Rishi Kumarpur.
Maharaj, Dhanava Pranam. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. Maharaj, my question was with regard to knowledge, it is easy to sort of measure. But how do we measure perspective and conviction? Are there some predetermined metrics?
Well, you can understand perspective if people understand Krishna's vision. That can be done just by asking people questions or having essays or seeing what their understanding of Krishna consciousness is. As far as conviction, their steadiness in devotional service, and their steadiness in devotional service and their ability to formulate proper relationships with others based upon the conviction that they're dasa, dasa, anudasa. I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. A relationship with superiors, a relationship with equals, and a relationship with subordinates can be seeing how much conviction they have that they're remaining a humble servant of the servant of Krishna in all their relationships. And they remain steady in their service in spite of whatever difficulties they may go through. That's how conviction is displayed. Thank you, Paula. Did you have another question, Nanda Kumar? You just didn't put your hand down.
Maharaj, can you make the screen go little up if possible?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Maharaj.
You mean like that?
Little more. The screen
I don't know, like that?
is not moving.
Oh, I don't know what the screen is.
Maharaj is the shared
Oh, I think, yeah, sorry about that. Stop this share. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. One thing is that I didn't really give a whole summary, is that because there are other presentations, I think Mahendra Prabhu, are you giving tomorrow? What's your topic tomorrow?
It's maturing members.
I didn't deal so much in that. I just gave a summary of some part of what came before, but Mahendra Prabhu and others will give further developments of what we're talking about, or further details.
Maharaj, thank you for being persistent and consistent on your vision. It's so attractive. It will work. I have a conviction like that. I feel like that.
Well, that's good. It's not, first of all, hopefully it's not my vision. I'm trying to convey Krishna's vision the best I can, and Prabhupada's vision. And hopefully it can be conveyed in such a way that you can understand part of it, and it can be practical in your service to develop your own Krishna consciousnesses and to help others develop their Krishna consciousness too. So thank you for your attention. Grandhara Srimad Bhagavad Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakti, Gaur Premanande.
His Holiness Prahladananda Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna.